the amount of glucose that it takes to run a body at 100 is like 4/5 of a teaspoon. That's it. Now, a can of Coke is 12 teaspoons of refined sugar.
Wow.
So if your body is not even running off of 1 teaspoon, what do you think all of this sugar is doing to systems that were never evolved or designed to handle this kind of just overt raw sugar intake?
Mona, I am so happy to have you on the podcast today. And like I said before, I was very excited to bring you on to talk about diabetes because I have yet to do a podcast about diabetes. And I'm really excited to talk to you about an integrative approach to diabetes, especially now with the rising rates of diabetes in our country. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks very much, Courtney, for inviting me. My pleasure.
Yeah. So what's your background and how did you get into integrative diabetic approach?
I'm a naturopathic physician and I've been practicing for 33 years. And my story is, I hope, embarrassing and inspiring, I hope. But when I was first starting out in my medical practice in Great Falls, Montana, I actually missed the diagnosis of a type 2 patient who was in a really acute state. And so that made me question everything about myself as a physician. Was I a responsible physician? Should I be in care of people's health? And it really threw me deeply into self-analysis. And what I decided is that I do want to be a physician, but I was going to make sure I never missed anything related to diabetes again. And so I went and worked with Dr. Richard Bernstein in his clinic in New York, and I launched upon a lot of study and became, I guess, really an expert in all aspects of diabetes, type 1, type 2, kids, insulin, medications, and of course, all of the beauty of naturopathic integrative methods of looking at it and also treating it.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So what is the difference between diabetes 1 and diabetes 2?
So the difference, just a quick difference, is diabetes 2 is a disease of insulin resistance where these patients are able to make insulin. And in fact, they're usually overproducing insulin because almost all the cells in our body, aside from there's a set of 4 cells that do not require insulin to take glucose in, right? But for most cells, there's a cell and there's a receptor that insulin lands on. And then there's this chemical phosphorylation reaction that stimulates inside the cell for glucose transporter 4 to reach out, grab glucose, and bring it inside. And there, based on insulin's guidance, it should turn into fat and store as energy. But once people start getting overweight and into obesity, or even worse, morbid obesity, and especially with weight gain around the abdomen, the cells have enough fat in them and they don't want more glucose and they don't want more fat. And so they become resistant. The insulin will land in their receptor, but they're not listening. The glucose goes higher in the bloodstream since it's not entering the cells, and at a certain number, fasting 126 and above, they have diabetes. So the process for them, now there's many, it's not just abdominal fat that causes it. There are many etiological reasons for the insulin resistance process to begin. Now with type 1, this is an autoimmune disease. For also other reasons, our own immune system just starts attacking some aspect of the pancreas. And that causes enough damage to the beta cells in the pancreas that produce insulin that they're no longer able to produce life-supporting amounts of insulin. And so these patients, some point in their health, will need to live on insulin to enable their food and their glucose to get in their cells. Now, a type 2 diabetic patient can be so poorly controlled for so long that there's so much damage to their beta cells that they no longer are able to produce insulin and need to go on injected insulin. But you don't, but they're still type 2. They're just poorly controlled type 2, now insulin dependent, right? Never become type 1, which is that autoimmune situation.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know that once someone is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, that they will be on insulin for life. There's no sort of reversing of that. But with type 2 diabetes, some people say that you can reverse it, or a lot of say, or it just becomes asymptomatic, whatever you decide to call
I
that.
think the best term is controlled.
Yes.
Now you can have controlled or you may be reversed. What we shouldn't say is cured.
Yes.
So whether it's controlled without medications or it's been reversed, I think those are good terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's really why I wanted to do this episode, because I want to give people hope that even if you have a diabetes 2 diagnosis, that this is not the end of the world, that there are things that we can do, especially diet related, to control it. Like you said before, and I definitely want to dive into that, but I want to dive a little bit more about into the mechanisms of this before we do that. First of all, you mentioned this, and I want to hear what some of the other signs and symptoms are. So what are the signs of diabetes 2? I know that you mentioned the fat around the middle. What are some other signs and symptoms that people would look for?
There's unfortunately not many necessarily. They're not really getting into what we see with the extreme onset of type 1. They're probably a little tired, fatigued. They could have more of an appetite. Insulin resistance drives appetite, which then is this catch-22 of eating more and gaining weight and having more appetite and so forth. But there may be, for example, wound healing may not be good. There may be in women more vaginal yeast. In men, maybe some jock itch, sort of fungal overgrowth, more athlete's foot, because fungus, of course, when we make bread, flour, yeast, sugar to feed the yeast, and water. And so too much sugar in the body, if there's yeast, which is a natural microorganism in our skin and our internal microbiomes, that they can really proliferate, right? There are some skin changes, that can darken the skin, nigrocans. Oh my God! Of course, I have to have a brain lapse right now. But
Okay.
there's skin tags. So neck skin tags are associated with insulin resistance. So there's some varied kind of changes that can happen. But in America, which is a first world country, it's so easy to get blood drawn and to just get the glucose that before most, like ironically, the patient who drove me into diabetes expertise was in an advanced state of type 2 diabetes. But I've had patients walking in my door, oh, they're a little tired, they're not feeling good. And there's just enough that I like poke their finger in the office and they're 443. And how are you even getting out of bed?
Just to give people an understanding, what's the healthy range?
So our ideal fasting glucose should be around 80 to 85. After we eat, maybe anywhere from 100 to 120, and then goes, that 80 to 120 will be an average of 100, which is a A1C, one of our long-term monitor labs of the last 3 months. That'll be a 5.0. So that's an ideal A1C. So that kind of spread. So if you're a diabetic patient fasting, if you're 126 or above, or after you eat at 200 or above. So walking around at 443 is very
frightening. Yeah, that's really scary. So you've mentioned insulin resistance a couple of times. So for people listening, I want them to understand, can you have insulin resistance without having diabetes? And what exactly does insulin resistance mean?
You can certainly, pre-diabetes is the beginning of insulin resistance. And like most things, there's a mild and a moderate and then a severe that can happen literally over years, right? As I said, insulin resistance just means the cells of the body that use insulin to take glucose in are not doing that, even though there is insulin in the body to stimulate that, but they're not listening. Now, there's many reasons cells can become insulin resistant, and that can drive the development of diabetes, for example, deficiency. So the cells require and have that system work. It requires chromium and zinc and vanadium and magnesium and omega-3 oils. And these are needed to have that system really work. And not everybody may be eating these or having, honestly, omega-3 deficiency is pretty common. They say magnesium is an undiagnosed, very common nutrient deficiency. Although honestly, when I test my patients, it's very rare that I find anybody with magnesium deficiency. So I don't know, but nutrient deficiencies, obviously the weight gain, and the weight gain is usually right ascribed to eating too many calories and not exercising to help balance that. Now, the whole calorie in, calorie out exercise, there's other factors, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you are just eating Big Macs and candies and soda pop, and then you're just playing video games or watching TV, it's going to be pretty easy today to gain weight and become insulin resistant, right? Now, sleep apnea is in studies will help produce insulin resistance. Right? So people may not even know they're having that kind of a sleep difficulty. Certainly environmental chemicals there are environmental chemicals that are known as obesogens, help cause obesity, and diabetogens that help cause insulin resistance and diabetes. And given the preponderance of chemicals and toxins, when a newborn baby today has over 200 chemicals from the environment in their cord blood, like toxic chemicals are a huge problem and are leading to a lot of people gaining weight and developing diabetes, because not everybody genetically detoxes at the same rate. And so if you're just born into a toxic world and your detox is a little slower just because your liver came out that way, and that puts you at higher risk of having these chemicals settle in your fat tissues, initiate insulin resistance. And then, of course, we have our microbiome, right? So the microbiome, we're understanding, has a lot to do with how well we metabolize our food, how insulin resistant we are. A lot of insulin resistance can be driven by inflammation, not just in the body, but also gut inflammation can get through the lining, go to muscle cells, and produce insulin resistance. And of course, our gut microbiome, with all of our antibiotics and other drugs that affect the microbiome, like birth control pills
and glyphosate,
they do that, right? As well as just our diet and eating genetically modified foods and poor diets. And our guts take a huge amount of insult to them on a daily basis for the vast majority of our population. And that's changing the microbiome, oftentimes to microbiomes that are not going to enhance metabolic burning of food, of energy, and will produce insulin resistance. We've got so many different factors that can be involved in each individual patient, leading to this true crisis of diabetes. Now, I have at least 30 million people with diabetes, and out of, say, 320 million patients, so practically 1 out of every 10 people in America is a diabetic, and around almost 100 million are pre-diabetic. So we're looking at 1 out of every 3 American is either pre-diabetic or diabetic now, and things are just going to get worse because age-wise, 1 out of every 4 person over 65 is a diabetic. And we're having our patients, the baby boomers, we're getting this population where people, if we can just be, I'm not trying to be ageist because I'm entering that population soon myself, but if we're just going to stereotype, which is not always very good, but sometimes we look at older people as they have some medical conditions or on some medications, they're not exercising as much, they're not as active, or these things that can be factors in leading to weight gain. Obesity, being overweight, that's 60 to 70% of our population. Like we're in a crisis, and it's not us. Let's not pick on America. This is worldwide, right?
Yeah.
This is worldwide.
Yeah, it is a big problem.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier that I want people to understand what this means. Obesogens and diabesogens. So
Yeah.
I've actually never heard of the diabetes one. The obesogens are something I don't think I've ever mentioned on the podcast before, but I know that they are like phthalates that we get in plastic.
Yes.
So plastic water bottles, if food is stored in plastic, if you heat up your food in plastic, et cetera. What are some of the other obesogens and diabetogens? Is that what you call them?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So these are what we call them endocrine disrupting chemicals. They actually can interfere with our endocrine system and with our hormones, right? For example, bisphenol A, right?
BPA.
Now, of course, they're taking that out of a lot of foods, but then they're putting in other bisphenols.
Yep.
All of the BPAs and these polycarbonate plastics that you've said, these are clearly seen as obesogens. Also the phthalates, which you also are up on. And this is plastic packaging, even grabbing the receipts. Yeah, you're right. You're just going to be getting phthalates on your hand. So this is, these are very big hormones that can cause problems in people. There's another herbicide called atrazine. That's a very widely used herbicide. It's found and in, of course, therefore it's in surface groundwaters or food. It's also associated with being a diabetogen. And then also,
sorry, before you continue, that's the one that's known for changing the sex hormone of frogs. It's turning male frogs and
male androgens. Yes, exactly.
Turning them into female frogs.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very scary.
Scary, right? And then there's polyvinyl chlorides. So this is another, these chemicals are, even if people don't know about them, they're out there. Now, another one, the PFOA, which is very long for me to stumble. It's perfluorooctanoic or something like that. PFOA. It's a surfactant, and that's what is put on waterproof clothing and the non-stick or stain repellent. So like you're gonna, let's put stain repellent on our sofas and our carpeting. And if it's this PFOA, then every time your child sits on the sofa or you do, or is on the floor, they could be exposed to this chemical, right? These are some of the top ones. So when we're talking with patients, not just with diabetes, but certainly with pre-diabetes or diabetes, going over making their home as green as possible is really important, right? Just making sure that they're getting out all of the chemicals and they're not excluding herbicides on their lawn, pesticides. There's a good company where I am. I'm in the Phoenix area, and there's a company that truly does organic, right? Organic pest control. Like they'll use peppermint oil instead of, and it works. But it's all their toiletries and all of these things that we're exposed to. Now, we can't do anything about walking into our work or our business or shopping where everything is sprayed, and this is just the world. And even if you're getting 100% organic food, the next field over was sprayed, and that goes up into the atmosphere, and then the cloud moves it over your organic farm and it rains down on. So even
it's in the groundwater.
Organic is 100% just because of rainwater. And we actually can get pesticides from China coming over the Pacific and raining on our fields, but at least they are clearer, and at least your money is supporting those farmers. And more we have money supporting them, of course, we have much more of them out there.
And you're getting less exposures to those chemicals, at least, because they're not applying the chemicals to the food specifically.
Exactly.
Even if it is getting the runoff, you're still getting at least a less of an impact, which is really important. And I tell people this all the time, that like you were just saying, there's only so much we can control. So this is why it's really important that we also support our detoxification pathways. So support your liver, take supplements that support your liver, and also sweat every day if you can, move your body, get your lymph flowing. Like things like that are really important, because there's only so much we can do about our exposure. So then we also need to make sure that we're detoxing out and cleaning out our system.
And just that's completely correct. And I agree with it 100%. In naturopathic medicine, the four emunctories, right, is the liver, colon. So we also have to make sure that people can have a good bowel movement every day, because you can have the liver dump it into the gut and have it be reabsorbed. The kidneys, the skin, and then the breath. But I'm just picking up on sweating. Absolutely. We know, like when I was in medical school, we did what's dead lab, or that was cadaver lab, which was when we had to cut up a cadaver. They're all preserved with formaldehyde. And so right after that class was over, even though we were dressed in plastic and we'd run down to the gym right at the bottom of the hill from our medical school, I'd hop in the sauna. So within 20 minutes, I'm in the sauna and I could taste the formaldehyde coming out of my skin. I could taste it. Ooh. It's crazy. But the problem is in America where, oh, I don't want to sweat. Oh my God, I have a sweat stain. Like sweating is, we want to always be cool. And God forbid so for sure, I tell people, even when they work out, wear enough clothes that your top is soaked every, you're not supposed to work out and just always be cool. Be hot, sweat. And then definitely getting into saunas and sweating. We know scientifically that chemicals, heavy metals, even mycotoxins can come out through the sweat. And that is definitely underused by so many people now around the country and around America with our deodorants and all of this, where people don't welcome sweat as well as they should, as such a powerful detoxifier.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah. So I want to ask you, because I know that there's a little bit of debate here about so we've already talked a little bit about what causes diabetes, but I want to talk about the overconsumption of sugar in this country, because it is in everything now. Look at salad dressings and tomato sauce and like just all these things, our nut milks, our peanut butters, everything. And when you add up, if you look at the end of the day, how much products that you've consumed that have added sugar, it's really getting concerning. And I've seen a little bit of resistance recently, like people talking about this on Instagram saying, no, it's not the sugar, but I don't believe that's true. Do you think that our overconsumption of sugar is leading to this?
Overconsumption of sugar, first of all, let's state food groups, right? Vegetables, fruits, protein, grains. Sugar is not part of them. Sugar is a poison. It's been a poison since day one, and it is just a poison. It's not a food group. It's not something to eat. It's just something we do eat. It's just like cigarettes are not part of our breathing. It's just what people do, but it's not like naturally a part. So sugar is a poison. And I think it's been stable around 150 pounds of sugar a year. And a lot of that is because it can be hidden in all of these other foods. Now, the good news is, of course, you can buy all your foods without refined sugar in it, but you have to be cognizant and look for it and be aware of that. But for sure, here's the deal. This is so when we want our blood sugar to be, I have a handout that when we want the blood sugar to be around 100, the amount of glucose that it takes to run a body at 100 is 4/5 of a teaspoon. That's it. That's like how much sugar is in your body running everything. And that extra 1/4 teaspoon puts you into diabetes. Now, a can of Coke is 12 teaspoons of refined sugar.
Wow.
So if your body is not even running off of 1 teaspoon, what do you think all of this sugar is doing to systems that were never evolved or designed to handle this kind of just overt raw sugar intake, right? Anybody who's saying it's not a problem, why would we listen to them? Like, we just need filters. You just need filters.
I agree.
Like, sometimes it's like, I just watched a little bit of Iron Man last night, and Tony Stark is and he's got the holograms, and he just throws this out and he throws that out to focus on what he wants. And that's what I think we have to do with a lot of people's thoughts. You're like, sugar's not a problem.
Bye. I know.
Yeah, you just
Well,
gotta just send it away like a useless hologram.
because we have to think about this logically, because to me, it makes perfect sense. It's just common sense that if you are over consuming sugar and overloading your body, there's only so much, like you were just saying, that your body can utilize. And then what's happening to the rest of it? And of course, we're dealing with insulin resistance when we're just constantly flooding our body with more sugar. We're having to pump out more insulin. And eventually our body's going to say enough. And that's what we're witnessing right now and what's happening. And I want to be really clear for people listening, because I know there's a lot of confusion. When we say sugar, we're not talking about fruit in its whole real form. We're talking about like refined white sugar that's being added to things like cane juice and white sugar, brown sugar, etc. Fruit is okay. I still tell people that you want to be careful with how much fruit you're consuming every day. You don't want to be eating like 5 bananas a day.
No.
But fruit is okay. It's healthy. Yeah. It's a healthy form of sugar because it also comes in a package of fiber and minerals, and there's other nutrients in there that help slow down the sugar.
Yeah, and antioxidants and vitamins. And so absolutely, we are on the same page with all of your comments.
Awesome.
1 or 2 fruits a day is plenty. And then you want more produce, turn it into vegetables. So that's where the next phase of your produce intake should be. Totally.
Yeah. So what are some ways that what can they do? What are ways that they can prevent from developing diabetes? So let's talk a little bit about diet changes, lifestyle changes.
Type 2, certainly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Type 2.
You're going to have people that are equally overweight and maybe equally don't exercise, and they have diabetes and they don't. And so there is a genetic component to who has a higher risk. There's also lean type 2. So I've had patients that have grandmother had type 2 and mom has it and brother, and they're lean, but we're just eating badly and got type 2. So one is, what is your own personal risk factor? Where is it in your family? Are you Hispanic? Higher risk. Are you African American? Higher risk. Are you a Pacific Islander? Higher risk. And so obviously, honestly, just trying to maintain a healthy weight somewhere within the range of what a healthy weight would be for you and your height and weight and body type and bone structure, etc. But generally, I don't know of anybody who's becoming diabetic eating whole foods and getting some exercise and getting their sleep. And also emotionally, if you're stress eating, then we have to process the way a person handles stress. Life it's a tough planet, as I say. If stress eating is one of your methods, then we just need to sit down and work on other ways. Do we need counseling? Do we need to engage many other stress reducing therapies that there are? And so a lot of it is, honestly, if people honestly picture the most commonsensical things, that would work, right? Eating a whole food, eating a healthy diet, getting exercise, getting sleep, managing your stress. I'm an advocate in everybody taking a multiple vitamin and fish oils so that every day, all the nutrients that your body needs to run, including those for pre-diabetes, are being taken in, so that if this day is a little less than that or a little that, at least we know nutritionally the body has what it needs to not become as easily insulin resistant nutritionally, right? I don't think I think a bigger Instagram thing would be, should we eat grains? Like, grains have gotten this horrid word. Oh my God, grains are so terrible. Really not. Grains have always been a part of humanity's life for the last at least 10 or so thousand years. And Rome ate the bread conquering the world, and the Chinese built the Great Wall of China with eating rice. It's not like we've been sick and weak as a human species, because we have historically been eating grains. That's not been the case. But the thing is, of course, things in balance, and the quality of the grains and how you are eating them. So I do think that if you're just trying to live life and be healthy, I do believe that grains can be a part of that for sure.
Yeah, I just had Zach Bush on my podcast, and we talked a little bit about this, and he believes, and many people in our field believe, that it's really not about the grain so much as it is about what we're doing to the grain, which means that we're spraying it with glyphosate, we're spraying it with other herbicides and pesticides to dry it out. And then also, we're not using the same heirloom seeds and strains that we have eaten for a long time.
If you're talking Now, if we're talking specifically about gluten, right? Historically, yes, we would use something like Eichhorn, was lower innately in gluten. And we would always make bread with mother's yeast. Now, mother's yeast will break down gluten in the bread so that it isn't something we have to digest. And then came the 20s, and women are getting liberated, and we don't want to spend the time in the kitchen all the time. They made packets of yeast, baker's yeast. That'll make bread, but it won't break down gluten. And over the 1900s, we decided, you know what, bread is good, but I want pizza crust and noodles. That takes more protein. So we hybrid wheat, which is not GMO. Hybriding wheat, there's nothing the matter with hybriding something for the human body to eat. It's the same natural DNA. We're just picking out one aspect and focusing on that. But our wheat, we wanted to have more protein. That's gluten. So we made a lot more gluten in the bread, processing it and then baking it with a baker's yeast that doesn't break down the gluten. Whenever we do stuff like that, you just have to wait 50 or 60 years, and people that will be sensitive to gluten will start having that problem. There's still, though, nowadays many people who aren't sensitive to gluten, but there are people who certainly are, right? So that's gluten-y, the history of how gluten has become more of a problem and the factors that developed it. Now, glyphosate, yeah, that has a real screw up with gluten, even potentially producing celiac disease in the gut. Roundup, but it's not on our food. Roundup, I'll tell you, my neighbor next door, I sprays all her weeds with Roundup, and my cat, who was wandered, got lymphoma and passed away. And I believe that it was the exposure to, my neighbor's lawn.
Yeah.
And because this is what people get, they get lymphoma. So glyphosate, it's not really, it's Roundup on food, but you are surrounded by it with all of your neighbors,
it's everywhere,
and so forth. Yeah. Luckily, Bayer is not going to be producing it in the United States anymore because of all the lawsuits. So it will within a year or so, we won't be able to get it in our country.
Which is it's a huge victory. We've been fighting this for a long time. So this is a huge victory. I want to ask you about, so do you think that a low carb diet has been proven to be an effective treatment?
So we have the two extreme ways of diet for type 2 diabetes. And one is the low carb. Now, for sure, there's the low carb diet has definitely been proven to be really the best starting treatment for a person with diabetes. No doubt about it. And this has been promoted by Dr. Bernstein and my book, Master Your Diabetes. There's no doubt that this is the first phase diet. On the other hand, you have what's called the MP2 diet, so there's another diet philosophy of high carb, low fat, like vegan diet, right? And that is also out there and promoted as being very helpful for controlling diabetes. The problem is you can't combine the two. Like you can't eat beans on a low carb diet or you can't have a bunch of meat with your vegan grains, and they don't mix. But there are really good studies, even with a macrobiotic diet. I have the studies of how a macrobiotic diet made incredible improvements in men with type 2 diabetes from around the world, if you can live on that diet and so forth. So we have these extremes. Now, most people, at least in America for sure, you can socialize better and the diet is more familiar, and eating a low carb diet, we can have bread made from almond flour, and it's so much more applicable to a typical Western diet. That is by far the most prevalent and most desired diet and followed diet of people with type 2. It is for sure, you've got to, in that regard, you've got to remove the grains now, or not the grains, of course, the biggest part of that in a type 2 diet, but also other high carb aspects of food.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. So you're saying that it's better to go low carb, or it's better to go, like you were saying, the
No,
low fat, high carb?
my definitely the one I work with diets 99.9% of the time is a low carb diet.
Yeah.
But if you go online and you're searching, you're going to find well established people promoting this vegan high carb diet.
Yep. USDA food pyramid, which we know is complete
Well,
garbage. They promote a high carb, low fat diet for
right,
diabetes, which I think is asinine. It drives me
right.
crazy.
But the good news is that the American Diabetes Association, which I obviously have enormous issues with, but in their guidelines, they do allow that a low carb diet is a valid option that physicians can follow, put their patients on with diabetes. That was their most recent, that was a huge change for them, because for 40, let's see, from 75 to 2018, whatever, how many, 50 years, 50 years, they were obviously a high carb diet because fat. So here's the deal. We had people dying from, we didn't have much type 2 diabetes early on, but we had a lot of type 1. Well, we didn't have a lot, but we had enough that we could start following it. And these patients would just die pretty horribly. Invented insulin in 1922. Actually, a couple of Toronto researchers did. And then, so they started living a little longer until they all died of heart disease. And so then we did autopsies and found that their arteries were all full of cholesterol. So the ADA said, wow, we better have a low cholesterol, low fat diet, because in the 70s, that's how they understood cardiovascular disease. So that is what they've been doing forever. Now, of course, we know, for example, elevated triglycerides are not due to fat intake, it's too much carb intake.
Yep, exactly.
So, exactly. So finally, the ADA, maybe kicking and screaming, but they are now saying a low carb diet is a valid diet you can do. So that's a start. But
so let's get really granular here for people so they can understand. So how many carbohydrates per day does that look like in a lower carbohydrate setting?
Generally, a low carbohydrate diet is saying around 30 grams total of carbs a day, generally less in the morning. Bernstein came out with 6, 12, and 12, with the idea that we have less in the morning because of this phenomenon called the dawn phenomena, which is there are a few things happening overnight, but particularly cortisol is very high in the morning. So cortisol wakes us up, and it also stimulates our liver to make blood sugar so that we have energy before we break the fast, breakfast, and get on with our day. So because we have this dawn phenomena and higher blood sugars generally in the morning, especially in people with diabetes, we have less carbs right in the morning. And then because we're up and moving and being a little more active, more at lunch and supper, for around 30 a day, 30 grams. So that's pretty low carb.
Yeah.
Now, a keto diet gets down to maybe under 20, right? Or 10 grams, very low. But 30 is going to work just as well, and allows more things like nuts and nut flours and things, and more variety that people enjoy being on this diet long term.
And is that including net carbs, or is this just regular
No,
carbs?
it is net carbs. So for example, if you teach patients that if you're looking at a nutrition label and it says this has 10 carbs, but 8 are fiber, then you just have to count
it's just 2.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
definitely net carbs.
Okay, awesome. This is so helpful.
Yeah.
What else? So let's say someone's listening and either they're already pre-diabetic, or they have it in their family and they're concerned, or maybe they are already diabetic. What are some really helpful things that we can tell them outside of maybe going low carb and being really mindful of your sugars? Make sure you exercise daily. What are some things that we can tell them to help
You have to
them?
understand, those are huge things for patients. That's like, especially exercise. Patients can do the diet, but man, there's a lot of patients that have never really established an exercise regimen, and that they'll take the supplements, they'll get a sleep study, and they'll meditate, or they'll clean out the green, make their house green, but exercise like that, getting people to consistently do it and fit it in. That's not an easy thing to just say, okay, we're just going to take care of those things and then
Yeah.
do the other. That is the bugaboo.
And what people don't understand is this could be something as simple as going for a walk after a meal. It doesn't have to be like CrossFit and these insane high intensity workouts. If you like those, great. But it can also just be a walk around your neighborhood.
A 15-minute walk after meals has been shown to significantly reduce glucose. There's no doubt about it. But walking, or even there are just so many aspects of exercise, from even YouTube videos or even just doing some weights, some simple things at home. It's pretty easy to get a machine. I have an elliptical machine, like one piece that you won't just hang your clothing on, but that you can just pop on and do 20, 30 minutes before you run to work and so forth. We just have to train people to fit this into their life, because a huge amount of Americans do not have exercise as a habit. Mm-hmm. And so that is probably some of my focus a lot with them, putting them on, they should be on supplements. Diabetic damage. So remember I said 4 cells that don't need insulin. So those are the eyes, the kidneys, the nerves, and the blood vessel lining. And those are the cells of the body that, if diabetes has been uncontrolled for long enough, develop diabetic complications, right? Diabetes is the number one reason adults go blind. It's the number one reason for end-stage kidney disease and dialysis. Aside from trauma, it's the number one reason people get amputations. And of course, people with diabetes have a 4 to 6 times increased risk of dying of cardiovascular disease, which is bad because most Americans die of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
So now you're even higher. That's what so that is the pathways that produce that damage are oxidative. So people with diabetes need to take a lot of antioxidants. Now I'm not trying to shill my stuff, but I have a very good product called Diamend by a company called Priority One. And if I do a multiple and fish oil and just give them that product, they're protected. And because it also reduces insulin resistance. It is cravings for sugars. Gymnema sylvester can do that. It can protect their pancreatic beta cells, and it also can prevent the complications of these end organs if their numbers aren't perfect. And numbers aren't always perfect, but it's easy to get a lot of your patients, my patients, have an A1C of 6 or less, and it's going to be really difficult to get damage with those kind of A1Cs, because those are still pretty good for anybody. They're not even diabetic A1Cs, which start at 6.5, right?
And for people listening that don't know what A1C is, can you explain that really quickly?
Yeah, so the A1C is a measurement of so we have our red blood cell, and the red blood cell lasts for 3 months. So we're measuring a protein on the red blood cell called the A1C, hemoglobin A1C protein. We're measuring what percentage of those proteins are covered in glucose. So if you have an A1C of 5, it means 5% of your A1C is covered in glucose, which we can translate to a glucose number of 100. If your A1C is 6, it's 6% is covered in glucose, which translates to a glucose of 126. And so then we have 7 and 8 and so forth. So we're using this to see over the last 3 months, on average, where was your blood sugar? It's our long-term monitoring lab, the hemoglobin.
And that's where people get diagnosed with diabetes, right? When you look at the A1C number on their lab range.
2 things. So the ADA says that you can just, if the A1C is 6.5 or above, and that is a diabetic A1C, but the endocrinologists say we really want the blood to match that. So if you have a fasting glucose of 115 and an A1C of 6.5, are you or are you not? Yeah. So maybe with insurance, you could say, hey, you know what? Let's say you're pre-diabetes right now because your fasting isn't supporting it, but let's really aggressively treat this because you are you are almost in the diabetic pool. Your hand is holding on to the edge. You're in 6 months, you're going to be fully diabetic if we don't yank this back. So I like to actually see the glucose and the A1C merge together.
Okay. And you just said something that I think is really important for people to understand is that just because I think a lot of people admit defeat when, let's say, like diabetes runs in their family or their numbers are already rising. But what's really important is to keep a watch on those numbers, because just because maybe you're headed in that direction or just because your parents have it does not necessarily mean that you are destined to get it. There's a lot of things that we can do, like everything we've just talked about in this entire episode, to keep you from actually developing it. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to have it.
I can say I have a relative whose father had a terrible case of diabetes and had his legs cut off and died of a heart attack. Horrible. And when she got pregnant, she had gestational diabetes. And this was a wake-up call for her. And she saw her dad. And we're now 38 years later, and she is not a type 2 diabetic. She changed her diet. She got into exercising. She took care of herself, and she has not developed the type 2. So yes, even when it's graphically right there in front of you, making these changes can overcome that genetic risk for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have two more things I want to ask you because I want to be mindful of your time. So what is it about being pregnant that makes women more susceptible to diabetes? What is the whole thing behind gestational diabetes?
So it's not pregnancy. If you become pregnant and you gain the 28 pounds that you're supposed to gain as a woman, as a general healthy amount that is enough for baby and amniotic fluid and so forth, you're not going to become a person with diabetes. But if you gain enough weight, if you decide, oh, I've been skinny all my life, now I get pregnant, I get to gain weight, I'm going to just eat this and eat that, and you don't want to exercise and it's in your family, then it's easy to gain the extra weight, which will initiate the insulin resistance. So it's really how much weight are you gaining, the quality of food, your nutrition stature, your exercise. Really, you can exercise pretty much all throughout your pregnancy, even if it is just, as you say, walking, which is humankind's innate best exercise. So this is the things that come together in that regard. Now, estrogen, we have higher level of estrogens, and that can initiate some insulin resistance. For example, in women who have type 1 diabetes, almost all of them will note right before their period, which is when their estrogens are now shooting up to initiate the bleed, they're going to need more insulin. We have much more estrogen, obviously, throughout our pregnancy to be maintaining it. So if you add weight in and then you have that estrogen, it can just be a negative combination.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then I want to ask you, is there anything else that we haven't gone over about diabetes, or really, I guess, just health in general that you think people should know?
Health in general. I think one of the things, diabetes, go to your physician and have them help you with supplementation. There's a lot of good ones and a lot of unnecessary. And then there's therapeutic doses and so forth. Life for me in general, I would say it is important to have filters up. And anything that is depressing or sad, you don't have to look at the news 100 times a day. And I think one of the best things about health is to just really work on being happy, not to the exclusion of making other people happy.
Yeah.
We have so many people, anxiety and depression, and then eating and not feeling like they can exercise. And just this can trickle over into their health in so many different ways. And so striving for just happiness and putting blocks up, you don't have to listen to this or that or let it go, and having gratitude, just thinking of if I hit my toe into something, I'll probably say some expletive, and then immediately, I thank God for the ability to walk. Any negative thing, I might automatically come out with something, but then I always stop and put a blessing, a thank you for whatever happened. Because if you can turn your mind around like that, it can become more of a habit. And it worries me even younger kids, the amount of anxiety and depression in our younger populations, and just working with people to try to do everything you can to feel happy. And that's what I say is a really vital part of all of us working or podcasting, just promoting so many different avenues to promote people feeling good about themselves and having happy chemicals in their brain regularly.
Yeah. No, that's a really great point. I'm glad that you brought that up. So I ask all of my guests this question before we go. What are your personal health non-negotiables? So these are things, no matter how busy you are throughout the day, that you prioritize for your own health.
So I do exercise regularly, and that is, I do need to do that. So that is something that I do incorporate. For me, with regarding refined sugar, for 34 years, which is probably older than you, I made a rule because sugar was a real poison to me. It caused obsessive compulsive disease when I was a kid. And so I have this, for 34 years, I have this rule that if I will only eat refined sugar on Sunday, and 6 days a week, it will never pass my lips. And no matter if Thanksgiving is there or a wedding, like, everybody knows I don't break that rule ever.
That's awesome.
In any way. And doing that, now, this probably does mean I do have a little sugar on Sunday, right? But I also usually hike around 9 or 10 miles on Sunday. So I'm like, that's awesome. A good day to combine those two together. But I won't eat. There's no way it will happen for 6 days a week, every week. It ain't going to happen. So for me, confining, really getting the sugar under control and having a regular exercise regimen. And I will say I'm also blessed. I've worked on this since I was 10. I have a quiet mind. And from what I talk about with patients, and for having a quiet mind, for me, it is a blessing. And I've worked on that a lot, that there's just not chatter regularly. So keeping a quiet mind and those other things are non-negotiables for me.
That's really impressive. And you gave very unique answers. A lot of people say the same stuff, but I liked that a lot. That was really helpful for people to hear, I think, too. And also, I'm very flattered that you think that I'm younger than 34, because I'm actually 38. So thank you.
Oh, you could pass for 10 years easily.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I attribute that to my healthy lifestyle and eating really well.
It's showing up, right? Really clearly.
I appreciate that a lot. Please tell everyone listening where they can find you, where they can find your book and your supplement. Just make sure you plug everything.
Yeah, I should have. You'd think I would be better at promoting myself and having my book here. But if you go to Amazon and you look up Dr. Morstein, Morstein, and just Google or Amazon Master Your Diabetes, and then the rest of it is a comprehensive integrative approach for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And you can see a lot of great reviews on Amazon, none of which I've paid for. I don't know who any of those people are.
So cool.
But that makes me feel better. And I'm at a clinic right now. I'm at a multidisciplinary clinic called Nevy Health, NEVY health.com. And I have my own website, Dr. Morstein, DrMorstein.com. So those are where people can track me down. I do telehealth a lot across the world. I have patients in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Turkey and Hungary. But I also, of course, mostly see patients in the States.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This was such an enlightening episode and I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
I did too. You're great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.